Hello, this is Echo Chernik, and you are listening to the Professional Artist on 1077 United Public Radio out of New Orleans. And I am actually currently in Woodland, Washington at the Forgotten Realms Festival, which is an awful lot of fun. And I am excited to have my friend on here, Lydia Burrris, who is my guest for today. Hi, Lydia. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you
Can you
doing?
hear me?
I can hear you.
Doing good. And you are in Chicago, right?
Yes.
So we are gonna talk about some art today and have a really great show and have some fun time. Thanks for making time to get on and talk to me today. I know that you have a busy work schedule. You work at a really cool place you were telling me about.
Yes. I currently work part-time at a place called the Creative Chicago Reuse Exchange on the south side of Chicago, and it is a resource for anybody can shop there, but it's a resource mainly for like art supplies, teacher supplies. We've got tools and hardware, raw materials, fabric out the wazoo. Really opportunity to get stuff for super cheap. Non for profit. CreativeGRX.org is the website. It's a fun place to work.
What was it? Creative
Creative
T
Chi CHI Creative
T
Chi
H I
RX
R X dot
at
org.
.org. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, there's one of those in Portland. I remember. I don't think it has the same name, but it's like a reuse type place, and you can go and you can get just all kinds of reusable materials that people don't have a need for. I don't know if this one is similar to yours, but I know that people would donate just the weirdest things. They'd have like, oh, I have these 40 million plastic milk caps, so here you go. And so
Yeah.
if you need like to make a samurai armor out of plastic milk caps, there's your place.
Yeah,
So
we have similar stuff. We have some like typical things, supplies, but we also have like strange things that get donated. I love working in the, unpacking all the donations. A lot of office supplies, which I love because they're so expensive if you go into a shop, but we've got like out the wazoo all sorts of office supplies, and and I've started taking things home to work on, cool projects, just weird stuff. It's just it's a really neat place, and like I feel like every community needs a reuse center where, when you're done with stuff but it still can be reused, donate it. Thrift stores are similar, but this is just has a little different of a vibe, a creative vibe.
well,
And I've been to other
it's
ones. There's, one in Detroit I went to, and they're all different. They're all set up a little bit different depending on what their community needs and what they can get.
they're kind of motivating too, because you go in and you're like, you just get inspired because you're like, oh wow, there's a giant, huge tub of like old slides from people's vacations. What can I do with this?
Right,
Look, it's the
right.
Grand Canyon. Look, it's somebody's aunt. Look, it's
Yeah.
you don't you just look at these slides like, I could do something cool with this.
I
What if
think
I pop the slides out, put something else in the little picture holder? I could do so many cool things with this.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We get stuff like that also, and it's really inspiring to be here. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be here because I'm going to be looking for a teaching job and everything, but I want to stay connected to it. And even if I left, I still would either come to shop or I would bring students here and make this part of a project.
Yeah. And if you don't have one of those places in your neighborhood or in your town, or if you're in a smaller place, also there's online. If you go online, the Buy Nothing groups are really good. I don't know if you belong to any of those.
Yeah, there's a
On
couple
Facebook.
like neighborhood Facebook groups of, where people can post things either for sale or for giveaway, or, there's like an alley alert. Hey, I saw this thing in the alley if someone wants to come grab it. And our
That's
alleys here in Chicago, they're magic.
there. Yeah, it's great when you're an artist. I can tell you, I've gotten the best stuff as an artist because art supplies are expensive, and just living as an artist. I mean, the less money you have to spend on art supplies, the more you can spend on other stuff. I remember when I was a student at Pratt, we still were developing supply. We were still developing our photographs in the dark room with like enlargers and everything like that. And I had to get all the supplies to develop the all the photographs, and those are really expensive, all the canisters and everything like that. And I showed up at the gates at Pratt one morning, and somebody had just left all of their supplies. I mean, just like boxes and boxes of, and they
Wow.
left an enlarger. They left all of their canisters just at the front gate, like it was like they were dropping it off at like front of like a humane society or something. They're just boxes of enlargers. Okay, I'm going to leave these for the poor art students now, and I'm like, oh my
And
god.
it's such a treasure when you find something like that. Like I love thrifting. I love looking in alleys. I love organizing also, which is why I enjoy working here, because it is an exercise in organizing chaos, because we never know what's going to come in, what people are going to donate, and then we have to figure out a place to put it. We label everything, and then the next day a whole section can be gone, and then we have to
Oh yeah.
re
And up in Bellingham, where I am, there's a smaller place. It's not very big, but in the back they do have a little thrift shop, and it's free. Basically, artists can donate anything, any supplies that they have, and other artists can come in and pick up whatever they need, and they just donate money wise whatever they want. It's basically, if you here's some half tubes of paint. Oh, I have $3. Here you go, and they just leave it in the tip jar and take whatever.
nice.
It's a great way to get rid of paints that maybe they didn't work for you or whatever, rather than throw them away. So,
Yeah, just like half tubes, you know.
tubes are expensive. Paint's
Yeah.
expensive, and
Yeah.
you know,
We
and
just got a huge donation of like pastels, and I was going through those and I was like kind of reorganizing them so that some of the packages are like full and then the rest of them are sort of just bits and pieces.
mishmash. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we got a big roll of my husband and I when we were printing, we got a big roll of paper and they sent us the wrong size and it was not glossy paper, it was just matte paper for printing, but it was the wrong size and they're like, don't return it. And I can't use it for printing on my paper, but I'm like, well, this is perfect drawing paper. So I just brought it down so that they could use it at the life drawing to draw on, because I'm like, well,
That's
this is
amazing.
great for drawing. So,
Yeah.
and anyway, but let's talk about you. So,
Okay.
LydiaBurris.com, LydiaBurris.com. I'll spell it one more time, LydiaBurris.com, for those of you listening. So, tell me about you and your artistic journey.
Oh my goodness. Well, number one, I have learned that I am ruled by whim. All right. I approach
That's
art
important to
very
know.
it's good to know. I approach art very fearlessly. I love to experiment. I love doing both 2D, 3D. I taught community art classes for about 10 years, and that community college art classes, and that also opened me up to so much more. I'm a medium-aholic, so I love experimenting and trying out new things and everything. I used to really bad. I wanted to be an illustrator so bad. And then when I finally started being an illustrator, I realized this is not my path because I am not geared towards my brain is so full of my own projects and my own ideas and my own wish to experiment that as soon as I sit down to do an illustration for someone, I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to go build a hut in the woods. And I have done that before where I just was like, never mind. It was something right up my alley where I was like, oh, I will do this project. It's something I would draw anyway. But as soon as I sat down to work on it, I had no desire to do it, and I needed to go work on 3D suddenly. And because I have ADHD officially now, um, I I I have a very hard time staying on track. Not that I won't do illustrations for people, but I even tell art directors, I'm like, listen, if you want to hire me, this is how we're gonna do it. And I can give great work, but I have to have a lot of wiggle room.
Mhm.
So the people who do not care to know exactly what they're going to get, I'll be their artist because
That's
I
good.
will give
See,
good work, but I gotta have wiggle room. And I work with people on their budgets and projects and stuff, and I can hone if I really need to, and if I have a deadline, I can meet it. But I
but
need to be given a
it's
deadline.
important to know that about yourself. If
Oh yeah,
deadlines
and
are not your strength, it's
I
important to
used to
know
feel almost embarrassed by it because in business, you need to have a brand, you need to have a certain thing you're promoting in order to like do well and make money and make a living at it. And I finally just accepted that my brand is kind of like all over the place. However, I do at least say that my work falls under the umbrella of dream space, dream world. It's very surreal. I can do stuff out of that, but that's where I gravitate towards anyway. So in my business side of my art, I really try to promote the idea that this is dream space, dream world kind of stuff. And that way I can put in my 2D, my 3D, my characters, my landscapes, my experiments. And if I go to shows, I will just throw in all the extra experiments I have into like the bin people can look at. And I have sold things I did not expect to sell at shows. And so my way of going about business is definitely sort of like this weird cottywomple,
So
and I would
you've
not
found your
recommend.
path. It's just maybe floating a little bit over there in the ether, a little bit alongside everybody else's path. And
Yes.
but you've been doing this a long time. I mean, because I've known you for a long time.
Yeah.
So how long have
Well,
you been
okay.
doing shows?
So how I started was I went to IU Bloomington for my undergraduate. I learned how to paint from life. I grew up in a somewhat artistic family. I was always doing like weird fantasy stuff, and my passion was surreal and fantasy art as a kid. And I've always been really obsessed with contemporary fantasy art and older fantasy art, things that could be labeled under the heading of fantasy or surreal or stuff like that. I love 19th century art where a lot of it was symbolist,
Oh yeah.
and so I learned how to paint from life, and then I went and got my master's in England. They had a 1-year program, and it was not like, nowhere did I go did they have any illustration program at all. And I kept like, at IU, I learned how to paint from life. And at my master's program, they taught me how to talk about art, but they broke me of being a quote painter. And I tell people I went in as a painter and I left as an artist because they like pushed me to explore my boundaries and things that were outside of just painting. And I realized, oh yeah, I love doing all sorts of stuff. And then I started doing conventions in 2007, and I found that I'm
It's
like,
about the same time I started doing them, I think,
I
too. So
realized
yeah.
I did more networking in one day than I did in an entire year of trying to network online. And I was like, okay, this is where it's at. And I've stayed doing conventions. I kind of took a bit of a hiatus. I didn't stop, but I majorly like downsized because I'm terrible at business. I realized that I kind of made more money during the pandemic by not going to shows.
Yeah.
Because it's a hamster wheel. I do make a profit unless I count all of the labor involved. But it is also where I get the most fans. It's where I meet and network with the best people. So it has served me beyond just finances. And it has served me well. And so after that, I'm like, I need to work smarter, not harder. I'm getting older and I can't just stay on this hamster wheel. But and you have to be an entrepreneur. You have to think about what it is that you're branding, and but also I never wanted to get stuck doing one thing. I realized maybe about 5 years ago that I didn't want to advertise myself as an illustrator anymore because I was debating on it. And then I got like a high-end sort of famous client that I was going to do a CD cover for, and then it it didn't work out. And it was like that came right at the moment where I was questioning, should I continue to pursue an illustration career, or should I just flow with being a weird ass artist and doing all sorts of shit. And after that sort of like amicably ended without me doing the cover, I'm like, okay, that answers my question. I'm just gonna I was so relieved. I'm like, I'm so glad I'm not under, have to do this project anymore. It makes me too nervous to like work with people sometimes, especially the more professional it gets. I'm like, oh God, hold up. But yet I am perfectly fine with promoting my own artwork and, you know, charging everything from like really cheap, let's get it moving, to like really high end gallery kind of stuff. Um and I don't.
Which is really cool, and it's really important that you were able to like decide, this is not the way I want to go, and not feel like you failed at it. You didn't be like, oh, I failed at being an illustrator. It's just like no, this is just not the path. I think I just want to go this way
Yeah.
instead. I
It
mean,
was such a
because this
hard
wasn't
decision
the
though,
right path.
because and it took me so many years to just kind of finally accept that, because that had been my dream for so long, and that's why I'm like, okay, you know what? Our life is our own and we only have it for so long. If you figure out that something is not for you, it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to leave. It's okay to come back. It's okay. And maybe after I get some of this other stuff worked through, maybe I'll come back. But I still somehow end up illustrating, because I have clients. I've been doing movie covers for independent movies. Michael Neal is someone I've worked with, a director, producer, and I've done a couple movie posters and props for some of his projects. They just did one called Teacup, and I did a movie called Celphaeus with him. And then just other random stuff that comes along. So I'm like, people still seek me out to do work for them, and I'm so grateful.
Like I like it, but I don't necessarily want to. But I
Yeah.
do, but I don't.
I
You
do,
know.
and I do love working with people. I just know that I have worked with people in the past, like professional game companies and things that needed more of a specific hand and a specific touch, and I felt kind of bound and it didn't feel comfortable. And then the work I gave them I felt like it was so subpar. Um, but Michael Neal always gives me the right amount of wiggle room and the right amount of direction, that I tend to work really well with him, and I enjoy doing it, and I give my best work that way.
If you find somebody you're happy working with, that's one thing. It's great when you can just get to the point where you can pick your clients that you're like, I like working with this person. My work always comes out good because they know not to over art direct me, and But
Yeah. Yeah.
some jobs, if they art direct you too much, or is can be challenging, and then they're no fun anymore.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I've had some projects where I was like, why did I agree to this? I charged way too little, or and it was just like, I have to get this done. Oh my God, and the grueling. But that kind of work is good too. Like, it's good to learn those lessons. It's good to get through that drudgery, and then when it's done, it's like, okay, I'm proud that I did this. Or maybe I could have done things differently, but it's like, I like having done illustrations for people more so than the act of doing them. Some of them I love. But it's just that part of like learning who you are when it comes to business. Uh-oh, did I lose you? Hello?
He's here.
Hello?
There we go. I'm back. So go ahead. Sorry about that.
Anyway, that's okay. Anyway, that's just when it comes to like the business of it, but because I want to do my own thing, I love just art in general. I have a deep passion for so many different creative paths, and as when I was teaching community college, I love being able to encourage people's their own path. Um I taught art appreciation for a while, and that opened up my own appreciation for just like every type of work, every style. Um and that, every time I take a tangent and go down a different pathway to experiment with different materials, I'll then swing it back around and integrate it into the artwork that I've already been doing. I did a lot of sort of like surreal, dark, fantastic paintings many years, and in 2020, during the pandemic, I had lined up a solo show for myself at a gallery, so I had a reason to continue making art, and I wanted all new work. And I had done a big collage project with my students at Ivy Tech Community College, and so I was jealous. I'm like, I want to work on collage, I want to do that. And I started making these really big paintings that were mostly collage, and then I painted on top of them and did a lot of stuff with textures. And suddenly that work became a little more accessible to a wider range of people. And I had some good success with that. Stuff didn't sell like right away, but a lot of it did eventually, and I still have some pieces. But I sort of have integrated that into my style now, and now I am going back to getting the urge to do more fantasy paintings, but I will also integrate some collage a little bit here and there on the edges sometimes. But I try not to be hard on myself if I switch back and forth between specific mediums and styles, because I know I have to just follow that whim.
Oh yeah, it's fun. And Athena wants to know how hard it was for you to get your master's while teaching while becoming an artist, if that was the
Uh
case.
okay. Okay, so I didn't, while being an artist. Oh yeah. So I went to England for a 1-year program. I researched different art schools, and it turned out it was a lot cheaper to go overseas. There, and I found a 1-year program in Norwich, England, at the Norwich School of Art and Design. I think it's changed names since then. And they had a master's program, and I didn't try to pursue anything else. I had like a part-time job at a cafe while I was pursuing my master's in England, and that way I didn't have to try and think about business while I was going to school. And so I could focus and keep all of my art brain just on doing the master's projects and thinking about that. Um, it was it was nice to be able to focus. If I had tried to, I didn't really pursue the business side of art until after I'd left that program. Um, but it was, I highly recommend going and living overseas for a little bit, at least over 3 months, and something starts to feel like home. And even though I was in England and they sort of speak the same language, it just that separate culture, and it is a different language. If you go to a pub in the evening and everyone's speaking their lingo, it's like, nope, it's a different language. I don't know what anybody's saying. Um, and yeah, it was a lot of fun to be in such a different environment. That was
So how
2004
did
and
you learn
5.
that? How did you learn the business aspect of everything? How did you figure all
Oh
the
my
business stuff out?
goodness. This is where the education system failed me miserably. I never once heard the word sales tax or income tax while I was in school all the way. And even though I was in a different country, there's still taxes, right? You still have to, whatever, there's still business. But all in my undergraduate, all in my, I never once learned anything having to do with like real business sense. And I had to learn all of that on my own. And I was like terrified when I left school and I was on my own. I moved into my own apartment in 2007 in Indianapolis. I found a cheap place, and super cheap place with a lot of space, and that allowed me to kind of like not kill myself to make rent while trying to pursue the business of art. And I always kept a little bit of a side gig or an odd job. Usually it was art related, but that at least brought in some income so that the rest of it I'd be responsible art wise. And I've kind of kept that consistent through a lot of my life. Like I'll do some part-time odd jobs and while I'm working on my art, and then when I get a little wiggle room, I will quit those jobs and pursue freelance for a little bit, or I won't do it during the summers. And that scares me to like, it puts me in a place where I have to sink or swim, and so I swim. And then when I get tired of swimming so vigorously, I will pick up another part-time job so that I can focus on my art as art and not have to focus as much on art as business, because then that bogs me down a lot.
That's a good
Um,
strategy. So it just gives you a little bit of a breather. So you can be like, okay, I don't have to like worry about the rent. I can just, get paid
right.
and work on my art and stuff. So
Yeah. And especially when you want to hone down and get in that flow, if I'm not thinking about who's going to buy this, it allows me to explore my own world a little bit more deeper. And I always
yeah.
find that that kind of work sometimes it goes and sometimes not, but more often than not, my own work is the stuff that people do gravitate towards. And so it's sort of weird to have this balance where like, okay, I want to make this epic stuff and I know people will like that more, but am I going to sell it? Is it sustainable? So you end up doing like smaller things that you know are a little cheaper and that are more accessible and you can sell, but then I don't want to spend all my time trying to make inventory because I have these epic things in my head. I want to get them out. And so
And it's
it's
hard when you spend like a whole day or a couple days or a week on something and you're like all passionate about it, but then it doesn't end up working. And then you're just look back and you're like, oh, I just spent all that time and I can't sell this. And you have to think about paying rent and you're like, oh, well, that just wasted all this time I could have spent paying rent. So now I got to like figure out how to pay my rent and make a bunch of inventory. And if you're working a job on the side, you that makes it easier. Then you're like, okay, well, I can just
yeah,
relax. And if it
yeah.
doesn't work, it doesn't work. But you still came out learning that whatever you did,
Oh
you know,
yeah.
you still have new skills,
Yeah.
which is cool.
And I always say
So,
to myself, it's like when things get tight and I need to generate income with my art, I say, okay, now it's time to do some fancy footwork.
all right, let's get fancy. Do you have a Patreon or anything,
I
or?
do. Right now, it's just a tip jar. I did have something where it was like a reward monthly or quarterly, but then that got overwhelming and I fell off the wagon and I'm like, I cannot be on a schedule. So it's just a tip jar. That's Yeah, it's patreon.com/ Lydia Burris, I believe. So if you look for my name on Patreon, it'll show up. And I sometimes will do crazy mail, so I'll do like send out some stuff, but I can't do any of it schedule. I know myself because I will fall off the wagon. I do publish my own magazine. That's where my what I did use my Patreon for a little while until it took me like 2 years to get one of the issues out. That's when I moved to a different city and it took me longer to get settled.
Ooh, that
S
sounds fun though. What's your magazine?
Alright, so the magazine is called Darkness Dreaming, and, that's sort of an overarching title. I kinda wanna use that title for other things too, and that be like Darkness Dreaming presents. But Darkness Dreaming, the magazine, I've got 3 issues out. The first 2 are in black and white and are available digitally, and the 3rd one, I have a lot of, issues I have a lot of physical copies still, and it's in color, full color, 40 pages. I get other people to contribute, so this one had, like, 30 contributors, plus a lot of my own art. Um, the first couple had, like, maybe umpteen less than 20 contributors, but I love collaborating with people, and I'll have a theme, and I know what my next theme is gonna be. I haven't initially officially announced it yet because 'cause I'm waiting until I have some more brain space to process it, but it's gonna be, Lost in the City. That's the next theme, and it
Ooh,
is
ooh, that sounds like
v
a lot of fun.
anything that's, like, bizarre, it can be dark, it doesn't have to be dark, visuals, but also very short word things, so very like vignette half page stories or poetry or I worked with a 3D printer once and did like um we put the image of his thing in the magazine, but then I had like a set of maybe 20 zines that with a little extra you could get one of his 3D printed things. So
Oh,
that
cool.
was and so I love just switching it up, and now that I live in a city I wanted to honor that with the next theme because most of my work is very organic and I grew up in the woods and it's like there's trees and veins and vines and stuff everywhere. And now with my collages, I started doing more city stuff and my artwork kind of goes back and forth between being very organic and illustrative and then very abstract and graphic and angular. And
Oh, I
so
can't wait to see
I'm
how it
really
changes your art. So,
curious.
how
And
do how could how
cities
can how do people find the magazine online?
darknessdreaming.com.
Okay, and can they submit to be in it, or?
Yes, they can. They can, I think the email for that is imaginer@darknessdreaming.com. So people can submit to it. I'm probably gonna be making an announcement within a month probably of the next one, but I'm accepting submissions early for it. But I think that information's on darknessdreaming.com. And it's also there's an Instagram for it, and there's a sort of a Facebook group for it, Darkness
Cool.
Dreaming Zine Team.
Zine
And it is
team.
like magazine sized. Actually, I have, for those that are watching, this is the most recent copy. It's magazine
Oh,
size.
cute. Oh, it looks so
And
nice.
so
Oh,
I did an interview
Imaginer
in
at
it.
darknessstreaming.com.
I did an interview in it with a guy named Matt Panfill, who is part of this venue in Indianapolis called Healer, which is like a really bizarre art and music venue, and it's surreal in there. It's like there's installations everywhere and flowers and things hanging from the ceiling and mannequins that move and stuff. But the interview, what made it fun is that it wasn't me interviewing Matt; it was my mannequin, Brune Hildegard. She went to visit Healer, and she's the one who asked the questions.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that's the kind of thing
That's
I love to
awesome.
do with this magazine, because it allows me to put all the things that don't fit on my art. I can put it in the magazine, all the little bits and words. I do poetry too. I do a lot of found text, and I do photo projects. I have a idea of I have a skeleton, like a resin skeleton, and I want to take him around Chicago and do a photo shoot with him and have that be part of the next magazine. And he's a character that'll show up in the
You are the
magazine.
picture of ADHD, aren't
Oh, I
you?
am. And Brune Hildegard, the mannequin, she is the voice of reason in the magazine. So like she'll introduce the magazine, and then there's a small blip by me, and usually my little word things are something silly like "I like soup."
Wow. So you said you have work in galleries too, besides the shows.
Yeah. In Chicago alone, I've put stuff in the Woman Made Gallery, which has been around for 30 plus years, 30 years. My mom had a piece there like years ago, and they were able to find the archive of what year it was and what she had in it. So Woman Made Gallery,
Oh,
there's
that's great.
a Wayward Arts Gallery, which actually I'm sort of co-curating their next show in October, called Dwellings, Houses, Homes, and Hauntings, because I was working on a series of that subject and proposed that as a group show. So we're doing that. The Vibrant Cast Gallery, which they're currently in the process of transitioning to a new location, but I did a couple shows with them, and just trying to say yes to as many things as I can and get the work out there. Moving to a new city. I moved here 3 years ago from Indianapolis, and I had a huge network in Indianapolis. And moving to new city, trying to gain a network, it takes a lot longer than I expected, and it's just more slow going. It took me longer to get settled than I thought it would. So I'm finally this year like really hitting the ground hard, running, after like 2 years of sort of being up and down emotionally and financially. And so now I'm like, okay, time
Yeah.
to jump back into the fray.
So why did you move to Chicago? Just or
Oh gosh, I just needed a change, and I just pressed the big old red reset button on every aspect of my life. I lived in Indy for 14 years, but I originally wanted to move to Chicago. And I had a friend who I was going to move with, but he wanted to get a job first, which makes sense. And I just wanted to go and get some stupid job like serving or whatever. And I was like nickel and diming myself waiting for my friend to get a job. And then I was like, I need to get out of my parents' place. I'm moving to Indy. And I thought it would just be like temporary, but it ended up being 14 years. I love Indianapolis, has a really great arts council, a lot of great artists, a lot of art events happening. We don't have a lot of collectors. I'm hoping that will change someday, but it's more known as a sports town. But it does
but you have
have
Gen
a
Con. Gen Con's there.
Gen Con is there, yes, and that's where I saw you last. But
Yes.
Indy is great, as the art community in Indy is. It's a really good community.
I like Indy, and I love Gen Con. And I still have to mail you back the watercolors I borrowed from you. So
No worries. I Yeah, Gen Con is great. That one that one was interesting because I used to do the art show at Gen Con, and then they started doing a jury, which is, it it was a little rocky at first. It kind of needed to happen, but I was one of the artists that didn't get called back. So since it was a home show for me, I went to the Arts Council in Indy and I said, "Hey, do you have any venues for 4 days during Gen Con? Because me and about 10 other artists kind of want to vend during that 4 days." And they were
Yeah.
like, "Oh, the Arts Garden? It's that what is it? It's over the intersection. It's big glass dome, beautiful like courtyard area, and it's just like
Oh
two and a
yeah.
half, 3 blocks away. It's like connects the mall to some hotels.
Yeah, that's
They
beautiful there.
they don't ever book the Arts Garden during Gen Con because it's too crowded or whatever, and they do book, music shows there, but they don't book the the Arts Garden itself. And they were like, "Hey, if you want to use the Arts Garden, we'll let you have it for the 4 days for a really good deal." So that fell in my lap. So I curated and hosted this 4-day art show vending event for like 10 artists. I even had a guest artist who passed on now, but his name was Chuck Baker. He was a wand maker. So I organized that for the 4 days. It was, hard work. It was a good time, but then on the 50th anniversary of Gen Con, I had an opportunity to come back under Studio Decide
Mm.
and have a table. And so now during Gen Con, I'm under Studio Decide and have my
Yes.
own. And I offered. Nobody wanted to take over the other show we were doing. We were calling it the Bazaar Alternative Art Extravaganza. And there is another
Oh,
Bazaar
cool.
somewhere not associated with that. And I really tried to be a mediator, and I worked with the Gen Con art show to make sure they knew that we weren't trying to be snarky or step on their toes or try to do anything like that. And I still have a good, connection
Well,
with
they
Barbara
just, I
there.
mean, it gets to the point where they get too big. I mean, unfortunately, you have to, when you switch over to having the jury, you're gonna have to jury
Yeah,
some people
yeah,
out, and they just got
right.
too
It
large
it
and
honestly, like,
hard.
as much as I feel for like the abrupt change that happened and some things could have been done better, I feel like doing the jury was not a bad idea at all. They needed it to get
Yeah.
new blood in. They needed to, it was
It makes
but
for
it
a really
is.
good art show, but I feel bad because I know some people that didn't get it, and I'm just like, but you're awesome. How did you not get in?
Yeah,
You've been
it
coming to
was
like,
really hard. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to be like, okay, we need to have a transitional thing for all the artists, including myself, that didn't get back in, because that's our summer income. And it
yeah.
was like, all right, let's do this. And we did it. And then it was just 2 years, I think 2014, 15.
Kind of helps you get through until you can
Yeah.
adjust. So, one of the things you have to do as an artist sometimes is you have to kind of make up the rules and figure out, all right, well, this didn't work out. How can I adjust? How can we pivot? How can we, what can we do to figure out the situation? How can we work the problem here?
Yes.
So,
And
because things are always
artists,
happening.
artists are generally really good at problem solving. Because
Yeah.
you have to kind of think outside the box a lot, even just in the practice. And if you're going to be a professional artist and you're going to do it as a business, you need to be an entrepreneur, which also involves a lot of problem solving and just rolling with the punches.
And honestly, you'd think that people would look at you really weird when you show up and ask them about stuff like using that space or the weird things that we come up with, but they really don't. They're really quite mesmerized by artists. They're like, wow, they don't they're like mesmerized by what we do. I remember I needed to have a picture. This is a little bit different, but I needed to have a picture of a sexy woman with a fireman hat on and a fireman hose, and I didn't have reference for it. And this was kind of a little bit before the internet had a lot of photo reference. So I went down to the fire department and I said, "Hi, I need to shoot reference with a hat and a hose. Can I shoot some reference of myself with your hat and the hose?" And they just looked at me, and I was like, and they're like, "Yeah, cool." And they're like, "Yeah, let me show you stuff. You want to wear suspenders? You want this? Oh, yeah." And they just got right into it, and they just thought this was the coolest thing that ever happened. Because
Oh, that's
honestly,
amazing.
people that aren't artists find artists kind of fascinating, and and they might think it's a little strange, but it's strange in a fascinating manner. So don't be afraid to kind of ask for what you're looking for. If you're like, hey, I want to set up my shop over there, just ask. The worst thing to say is no, you can't use my hose. All right, that sounded weird, but
Right.
that did sound better.
Yeah.
That sounded better in my head. but
And it's so funny because
but
I love using reference like friends and stuff, but I'm very shy actually. Like I am so get out there doing type A blah 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 with a lot of stuff, but then when it comes to asking people if I can use for reference, like I get really shy about it. I'm like, do you think maybe
I
I
know.
could use some,
Can
but I
I
do
just
there is a group in town called Grotesque Burlesque in Chicago, and I just started going again. They're on like Thursdays, and they have people come in. Mostly it's burlesque people, and they will pose both in burlesque and nude. And it's such a wonderful reference and resource as an artist to go and
Oh, that's
just
cool.
shoot the shit and draw, and it's so fun and laid back, and you get some really interesting like it's all body types and all the genders, and there's such a variety of bodies and personalities. It's so much fun.
Yeah.
And there's some other in town live art drawings and stuff, so it's like I feel like I need to reach out more and just utilize that, and i I should know more models because I also ADHD. One of my odd jobs is I do currently model for art classes.
Cool. Cool.
Yeah.
I've modeled. It's fun. So and sometimes like I found models this way when I go to a drawing session and the person's modeling, I'll just ask them. I say, hey, do you model on the side? And I'll get their information. So, if you're at a drawing session, you see a model you like, don't be afraid to ask the model if you can actually hire them
Yes.
outside of the drawing session,
I
whether
need
it
to
be nude or not.
specifically, yeah, make like a book for my own models of that I might hire. Be like, okay, here's the list of people rather than like, oh, who do I know that, and try to get on social media. Like I need to do
Yeah.
a binder. I need to have a
But
binder.
if you find, but if you, a lot of the times when people are modeling at even at the drawing sessions, they sometimes it's their first time, or sometimes they just do the drawing sessions. But sometimes you're like, hey, you're perfect for this job. Can I hire you? And and if they're modeling nude there, sometimes they don't want you to paint them nude or something. That's fine. You just negotiate that. You just say this is
Oh yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
you just negotiate. Usually when it comes to hiring models, I pay more if they're going to pose nude. I don't even need them to pose nude most of the time. I'll just have them pose in a bikini, and I'll take photographs because I know what all the parts look like. And but if I'm going to paint them nude, I make sure that they know that so that they're not surprised. And I put that in the
Right.
contract and everything. But I always pay more. I always pay more for if they're going to be if I'm going to be painting nudes and stuff. But I always pay like a minimum of. Like 4 hours because models don't
Right.
it's hard to model and you can only
That's like
model
a
for so
whole
long,
day.
so
Even if you're just there for like a few hours or an hour or whatever, but like you still have to set aside time for the day and do the travel and get,
it's a
whatever.
whole day or a half day
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
so
I
and
know
then
I don't
sometimes when
like
you
to do a
bring
gig and
friends.
unless it's like at least 3 hours.
Yeah. So I always try to get my models. I always pay them for the full day if I can, or a half day if I can, and I try to pair it up with a couple other jobs. So if I have like a client that hired me to do one job, I'll have a model post for that job, and then I'll shoot a whole bunch of other fun stuff. I'll be like, well, I wanted to do this woman doing this, or like on this particular pose, and I'll just shoot a whole bunch of other stuff at the same time. So I have these reference shots for later. So
Yes. Yes.
so
Um
I don't know. Do you
having
do a
s-
lot of reference shooting?
No, not really. I I work a lot from the sketches that I get. I do have some references that I've kept. I've used myself as reference a lot, but generally most of the characters I put in my work are kind of a mix between reference and then also just from my own imagination. And I know when my bodies and figures start looking sloppy, I'm like, "Oh, I need to start using reference again." And a lot of my characters are so just weirdly out there. Um that I don't necessarily need too much, and I usually have things growing out of people's heads, or their bodies get really elongated and they look like strange forest spirits with fingers come, I don't know, just
And
weird
veins
organic.
and things. And
I have a lot of rooty textures on people. I started working on this little series, which are like these strange forest spirits, a mix between that and maybe like a djinn. And I've been doing these really long dresses, like figures that have these really long dresses, like little tiny figure and then just this expansive dress, which can be very rooty or just weird textures. And I don't know where that's coming from because I hate wearing dresses. I'm totally a pants person, but I love the image of just this outcropping shape just expanding further and further down and becoming part of like the atmosphere or the of the woods behind. And it is, and then we go back to that weird dream space stuff I was talking about, where a lot of the work I do, I don't put specific meaning into it because I love the ambiguity that happens and I like being able to interpret it differently afterwards. And I love hearing other people's interpretations of the work. So quite often, like I might have a little bit of a meaning to it, or I might write poetry for it so that it's still ambiguous. Like it might lead into a pseudo meaning, but then it expands into. I want people to connect to my work in their own way, which sometimes is surprising. Sometimes it's like in the same world that I'm seeing, or they interpret it their own way, depending on what their own experiences are or how they're bringing that into it. Um,
oh,
I mean,
cool.
yeah. But
You must
then,
put some really cool music on and stuff while you create.
oh yes, or I alternate between music and audiobooks. If I have to
Oh,
think about
cool.
concept and I'm focusing on meaning or concept, or I'm trying to come up with a new piece, then I'll do music because I can't listen to words. But then if I'm in the nitty gritty and I'm just working on like textures or something, then I'm all about audiobooks. And when I'm doing my potion bottles, which is the picture behind us, and I'll talk about that in a minute. It's all audiobooks until I get to the words, and I get through a lot of reading that way. I I
Yeah.
don't read with my eyes; I read with my ears, because my eyes are always busy, of course. But the potion bottle, since that's the picture, I'll talk about it. I started creating these altered vessels because one, it recycles. Two, I needed something different. One for a convention, and I just started doing this weird, like three-dimensional thing and adding textures and tissue on top. And I loved the effect, and I've kept it going for many years. But so I'll take bottles and boxes and even figurines, and I'll just add on these weird textures with like glue and maybe rubber pieces, and I cover it all with tissue paper to give it a skin so it's paintable. And that process, I'm like ripping up a bunch of tissue paper, like wrapping paper, tissue paper, and I'm tatting it onto the surface for hours, just like covering the whole thing with skin of tissue paper. And then I paint on them, and then I add found text words. And I always tell people I make it a game with myself. I'm not allowed to come up with the title. I have to find the words for the potion bottles, and you end up with weird titles like Mind Mustard. I think Goblin Eggs was another one.
Ooh, weird.
Sometimes they're
Like,
really just sometimes they're like Ludwig's secret swamp oil is one. And then I started
ooh.
writing stories based on the titles of these bottles. So it's like this
Oh,
domino effect
cool.
of things happening. And I have a whole world in my head now based on the titles of these
The
bottles, which can
colors
get
of them are
really
so cool,
poetic.
though.
Thank you.
The
And I do
colors
a
are
lot of
so cool.
black
Are they
light
like
on them too.
translucent? Can you like light them like from inside? Can you see through
No,
them at all,
because
or?
it's totally opaque. So it's, but
Okay.
I do add a lot of iridescent colors. I have black light reactive colors. I have like there's one paint that's mica. It's got like these crystalline mica looking shimmers. So you put it on there and it just shimmers, you know? So
Oh,
I like using a lot
neat.
of different paints on it. And those the words on it and they look like potion bottles from another dimension. That I feel like the words, they're so not typical for what potion bottles would be. Um, they do lead to like a springboard for stories in a way. And
Oh
I've
yeah.
collected the names of all of them in a big spreadsheet, and I've done like over 500 of these, I know, over the last couple years. And I look at my computer, I'm like, what did
Wow.
I make this year? I didn't make a lot of art, but I made at least like over 100 bottles. Okay, wow.
Wow. They're so cool though. So what conventions are you coming up? Do you have coming up?
Well, I for the last couple years I was only doing Gen Con and Horror Hound, Cincy and Indie, but now it's both in Cincy. And I just signed up for Days of the Dead Chicago because I'm like, hey, it's a home show. I'm in Chicago now. I might as well do that one. And they still had vendor tables left, and I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
let's jump back into the fray and do more shows. But I also have that that Dwellings gallery show I told you about. That's happening in
Yeah.
October, the end of October. The deadline is October 8th if anyone's submitting. Wayward Arts Gallery is the gallery that's in charge of that. And I've got a couple other shows I want to submit to gallery wise in town. And I'm always looking for other like pop-up shows and stuff. I'm going to try to get out more with my setup and do more shows. So, and Days is
Do
in
you travel
November.
very far outside Chicago or not too bad?
When I was doing a heavy schedule, I stuck to the Midwest mostly. I have not gone anywhere where I had to fly. I think the furthest I went was both Kansas City, Missouri, but I think Gatlinburg, Tennessee might have been the farthest that I
Yeah.
went for a show. But mostly I'm
It would
just
be hard
sticking
to
to
fly with those
Midwest.
bottles, I think.
Yeah, no, if I
So.
flew, I would have to stick to my prints and small artwork, and nobody seems to be buying prints right now. At least not. I just got some new orders of prints, and that's like my lowest sales for prints in any of the years I've had. So it's like, oh, you never know.
Wow. Oh,
So
crazy.
that's,
So
but I keep just putting it out there and making the stuff.
cool. So what else are you? You got a few more minutes left. So is there anything else you plan on doing in the near future that you're excited to work on?
Um, yes, I've this dwelling show, I might continue to work on this series for a bit, and I'm doing a lot of these weird composite houses with collage and then adding in some of my own. And then there's that like gin sort of tree spirit stuff that I'm working on. I want to do larger paintings, and I'm feeling the urge to do that like dark surreal characters again. So I'm hoping to make some more paintings like that. And I don't know,
Cool.
like it changes daily, and I have to really like hone in and write down everything. More found text that creates a lot of fun little stories I want to expand upon. I have a lot of surfaces. When I just feel like I need to make art, if I'll put all my extra paint on a surface, or I'll just get really abstract with it, and I'll save all these abstract backgrounds on scrap paper, just scrap whatever, and then I'll pull from those and I'll paint on those sometimes, just as to be like, all right, I already have a background, let's f it up. If I work too hard on something, I'll backtrack and mess it up and be chaotic, and then I have to get ordered and make order out of it, make it make sense, and that back and forth sort of it allows me to kind of like, it's part of what runs my engine, is this back and forth between order and chaos.
Oh, that's just so cool. That yeah.
So, but
Well, it
just
sounds like you have a lot of cool things coming up.
try to do more work. And I just worked with a friend that I might get some references to make some strange fantasy dark characters from reference. So I'm excited about that.
Awesome. Well, hopefully I'll see you before next Gen Con. So I only seem to see you like once a year. So, but
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any
yeah, but
shows near in the Midwest area coming up?
I don't think in the Midwest area. I have this one, and I have Salt Lake City Comic Con coming up, but that's about as far that way as I get for now. So,
I see.
but
I see. Well, we
All right,
always
so
have
people,
Gen Con.
we always have Gen Con, which is the best show ever. So we always have Gen Con. So anyway, everyone, you can find Lydia at lydiaburris.com, LYDIABURRIS.com. And thank you for spending your time talking to us today.
Well, thank you for inviting
Um,
me. I was very excited.
and you have been listening to The Professional Artist with Echo Chernik on 1077 United Public Radio. And I will see you guys all next week.
Take care.